Have you ever witnessed a moment so profoundly unjust that it felt like time itself froze for a single, breathless second? Now imagine this. A bustling first-class cabin at 35,000 feet, where an elegant black woman settles quietly into her seat. Across the aisle, a flight attendant moves with an air of control and authority. Yet blinded by her assumptions, she fails to see the true power sitting right in front of her. What unfolds next is a confrontation between prejudice and hidden authority, culminating in a dramatic revelation that sends shockwaves through the entire aircraft. Buckle up. This is one flight that changes far more than just its arrival time. Chapter 1. The flight that would change everything. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon when Pacific Air Flight 4721 prepared to board at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, bound for Los Angeles. This flight was just one of thousands that took off from the world's busiest airport every day, a crossroads where millions of personal journeys overlapped, diverged, and continued on their separate paths. Among the early boarders was Dr. Celeste Monroe, a tall, poised black woman in her early 40s. She wore a tailored charcoal pantsuit, her curly hair swept back into an elegant bun. Her movements were graceful and deliberate, reflecting the confidence of someone used to commanding a room. Yet there was a warmth to her, evident in her soft greetings to the flight attendants and polite nods to fellow passengers. Few could have guessed the magnitude of her position. As the Director of Airspace Safety for the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, Dr. Monroe was a respected figure in one of the most important regulatory bodies in aviation. Over the past 3 days, she had chaired high-stakes meetings in Atlanta, crafting frameworks to enhance flight safety protocols nationwide. Settling into her plush seat Celeste exhaled a long, quiet sigh. This was her first real moment of calm in days. Chapter 2. Subtle Signs. The first-class cabin slowly filled with a handful of other passengers. An older couple seated themselves across the aisle, discussing their upcoming Alaskan cruise. In the row behind Celeste, a young tech executive was wrapping up a call, murmuring last-minute instructions into his headset. Celeste distracted herself by flipping through the in-flight magazine, skimming articles about futuristic aircraft design and exotic vacation packages. She didn't notice the flight attendant right away. Veronica Tate, a senior flight attendant with nearly 2 decades of experience, moved down the aisle. Her uniform was impeccable, her blonde hair pinned tightly into a bun beneath her hat. Her sharp eyes swept across the cabin as though searching for potential issues before they arose. When her gaze landed on Celeste, something subtle shifted in her expression. A flicker of confusion? Distrust? Celeste couldn't quite tell. But then the mask of professionalism slid back into place as Veronica continued offering pre-departure beverages. She poured champagne for the older couple and brought sparkling water to the tech executive. Celeste was overlooked. At first, Celeste thought nothing of it. Small oversights happened. But in her line of work, intuition was a finely honed tool, and something about Veronica's behavior prickled at the edges of her awareness. Chapter 3. The First Challenge. Minutes before the boarding door closed, Veronica approached Celeste's seat. "Ma'am," she said, her tone cool but measured. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Celeste raised an eyebrow, surprised but unruffled. "Of course," she replied, producing her pass from her blazer pocket. Veronica took it and examined it closely, more closely than seemed necessary. For a moment, Veronica's brow furrowed. Then she forced a tight-lipped smile and handed the pass back. "Thank you, Dr. Monroe. Enjoy your flight." Celeste nodded and resumed reading, though a faint tension remained in her shoulders. She told herself it was nothing, but the feeling lingered like the faintest turbulence on an otherwise smooth flight. Chapter 4. A Growing Unease. After takeoff, Veronica and the crew began cabin service. Drinks, then snacks. Once again, Veronica bypassed Celeste without so much as eye contact. Across the aisle, the older couple, introduced earlier as Jack and Lorraine Mathers, exchanged confused glances. The omission was obvious. but they said nothing. Celeste finally raised her hand to get Veronica's attention, but the flight attendant turned away sharply. It was impossible to ignore now. Celeste wasn't one to make assumptions without evidence, but this was becoming harder to dismiss. A few minutes later, a junior flight attendant, Rosa Martinez, passed by. Celeste politely stopped her. "Excuse me, I haven't been offered anything. May I have a glass of water?" Rosa looked stunned. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll get that for you right away." She returned moments later with a glass of ice water and a sincere smile. Celeste thanked her warmly. But just as Rosa turned to leave, Veronica appeared behind her. "I'll handle this," Veronica said, her tone sharper now. She turned to Celeste. "Dr. Monroe, I need to verify your ticket again." Celeste's polite expression faded. "You already have," she replied, holding up the same boarding pass. "What exactly are you trying to confirm?" Veronica's gaze hardened. "We've had reports of passengers moving into first class without authorization," she said. "I just want to make sure everything is in order." Celeste's jaw tightened. "This ticket is valid. This is my assigned seat." Veronica gave a cold nod. "I'll need to confirm with the gate agent," she said, disappearing behind the galley curtain. Chapter 5. Escalation. The whispers started immediately. Jack and Lorraine were visibly uncomfortable. The tech executive behind Celeste, who introduced himself earlier as Ryan Adams, leaned forward and muttered, "I've flown a lot. Never seen this happen before." 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Celeste sat still, calm but alert. When Veronica returned, her stance was rigid. "Dr. Monroe," she said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, "you'll need to move to the main cabin. Your ticket is not valid for first class." There was an audible gasp. Lorraine covered her mouth in shock. Ryan's eyes widened. Celeste remained seated. "That's incorrect," she said firmly. "You can check the manifest again, or bring the gate agent here." Veronica's face flushed. "You need to move now." Jack Mather spoke up. "We saw her board. She was here long before most of us. She's exactly where she belongs." Veronica's lips thinned. "This is an airline matter." Celeste drew a steadying breath. The professional side of her wanted to de-escalate, but the side of her that had fought for fairness and justice throughout her career refused to be silenced. "I will not move," she said. "If you have an issue, bring the gate agent." Veronica's nostrils flared. "This is your final warning." Chapter 6. The Revelation. Celeste had hoped it wouldn't come to this. She reached in her blazer pocket and drew out a slim black case. With calm deliberation, she opened it, revealing her FAA Director badge. "I am Dr. Celeste Monroe, Director of Airspace Safety for the FAA," she said evenly. "I suggest you check your manifest again." There was a stunned silence. Veronica's face drained of color. The polished, confident flight attendant was suddenly lost for words. Passengers murmured. Ryan whispered, "Holy, she's FAA." Celeste's badge glinted under the cabin lights. "This seat was booked weeks ago. You're making a serious mistake." Veronica took a shaky breath. I need to speak with the captain." She turned and hurried toward the cockpit. The entire cabin seemed to exhale. Chapter 7. Aftermath. Rosa returned with a glass of water and an apology. Jack and Lorraine offered their support. Ryan was already typing furiously on his phone, likely tweeting about the unfolding drama. 10 minutes later, Captain Harris addressed the cabin. "We are aware of a situation in first class and are working to resolve it. Please remain seated." Veronica reappeared, her shoulders slumped. She approached Celeste, speaking quietly. "Dr. Monroe, I apologize for the confusion. There was an error in our system." Celeste met her gaze. "You owe me more than an apology. Your actions were discriminatory and unprofessional." Veronica muttered something about policies and systems, but her confidence was gone. Celeste considered her options. As an FAA official, she could initiate an investigation that would ripple through the entire airline. But what mattered now was accountability. Chapter 8. Resolution on the ground. Upon landing at LAX, Celeste was met by Chelsea Rivers, the on-duty supervisor. They spoke privately near the gate. "We take this seriously," Chelsea said, "We'll conduct a full investigation." Celeste filed a detailed report, listing every incident and witness. She declined compensation, emphasizing the need for genuine change. Later, she saw Veronica standing to one side, speaking quietly with a supervisor. The woman who had wielded authority so ruthlessly was now subdued. Chapter 9. The Ripple Effect. Celeste's story didn't end there. Ryan's tweets went viral. The FAA's media relations team was alerted. Reporters began calling. At the aviation conference the next day, Celeste addressed industry leaders. She spoke of safety, physical, emotional, and psychological. Discrimination, she said, had no place in the skies. Her words were met with thunderous applause. Chapter 10. A New Course. Weeks later, the airline implemented new inclusivity training and stricter protocols for verifying passengers. Veronica was placed on administrative leave, undergoing comprehensive bias training. Celeste stayed involved, consulting on reforms. It wasn't about punishing one person, it was about changing a system. In the end, her ordeal sparked real change. And though she had faced turbulence, both literal and metaphorical, she emerged stronger, proving that dignity, respect, and justice should fly with every passenger. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why fairness matters at every altitude, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can keep conversations like these alive and work toward skies and a world where everyone is treated with dignity.